Welcome back to the Character Corner. Finally, is Kriss and Dpalm here. We had some delays in here, but we're finally getting started with, I guess, it's Captain Marvel Part 3?
Okay, so this is weird. Like, we're going to get through all the history of this comic book character. We're going to talk about the publication history and the actual legal history, which is somehow more interesting, in my opinion, than the actual in-character history. Mm-hmm. But let's deal with this first. It's Captain fucking Marvel. And this episode's probably going to tout Shazam because of SEO purposes, and there's a movie coming out. Though, I'll be honest, the Captain Marvel SEO might be more powerful at this point. Yeah. It's Captain Marvel, right? Like we're going to do this, and I'll do my best to call him Shazam because our Warner overlords have decreed it. But this is Captain Marvel, right? Just be honest.
I mean, yeah, but
when you see the big red cheese, when you see that lightning bolt and that half cape, what word comes to mind?
Well, my word comes to Shazam because I never cared. So here's the thing, and I want to get in. So we're obviously recovering DC's Captain Marvel or Fawcett's Captain Marvel, DC's Shazam. All of this comes down to being not Warner Brothers at the time, but national publication and DC's fault. This is all of DC's fault.
100% their fault. And other people think that we blame them for a lot of shit that's not their fault, and maybe we do. This one, fight us.
This is 100% their fault. You're absolutely right. From the 40s to the early 50s, when Fawcett Comics, when Fawcett had the rights, it was Captain Marvel, and we've covered this in our history of the comic books back in January. All right, it is 100% fact that Captain Marvel's comics sold more comics than anybody else. All right? They just did. They were selling like hotcakes. 14 million copies of Captain Marvel's Adventure sold in 1944.
I'm sorry. Say that number one more time for everyone who's barely paying attention.
14 million.
Thank you.
It was selling over 1.3 million a copy. A copy. I mean, 1.3 million copies per issue. All right, every issue over 1 million copies. All right, and National, and we'll cover this more in detail later on. National got all up huff and puffy and put a fucking a lawsuit out saying it was too close to Superman. And Fawcett eventually had to shutter. They settled. They shuttered. And we'll get into the details later on.
Let's step in here. Okay, we'll do the details later. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go into more details later. And then when DC decided, oh wait, we fucked up. That was a big character. We need to bring it back. They brought it back after Marvel had already got hold of the rights to the name, and so now they're stuck with a character that they tried to. And again, we're gonna go into more details with this. They brought the character back. And it was the same exact character from the Fawcett years. I'm talking straight line continuity.
So
he was stuck. He was stuck. It's dumb. But then they could not use the Captain Marvel name because they had waited too long and lost it. This is all of
they could use it in the books, but they couldn't use it to sell a book.
Right. And so now you have a character who again, it's been 30 years.
True.
About 25 to 30 years since you revived the character. You cannot use the name on the cover of the book to sell it, but you call the character that name. Imagine if Batman existed, but you couldn't call a book Batman. You had to call everything that involved him Gotham, the hero of Gotham, a Gotham Adventures. But you could never call the book Batman. That is what... And so
it's essentially the reverse Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman has to be in publication of the rights revert. They can't publish Captain Marvel.
Yeah. And so this all comes, and we're going through this, it all comes down to their fault. And so while you're right that, they call the character Captain Marvel through the books up until Geoff Johns and them just made the decision to go to Shazam, I'm saying that the more and more we hold on to that name, and I'm going to make the argument that I think this character could have done a lot better had they just changed it up front and went forward with it. But they were so fucking stubborn that they didn't want to do it. And so you're not going to
point to stubbornness, and I'm not going to fight you on that. But I will say that I think a lot of it is kind of the corporate makeup of National / DC / will eventually become Warner Brothers. Because when they bring in properties, it's not about integration seamlessly. you talk about, and it hasn't in the past. Like they're doing more now with the Jim World stuff over in Young Justice, which you guys should be reading Bendis's books. But when an imprint would be absorbed, it wouldn't be like, and here's how they seamlessly fit. It was like, bam, look who arrived. And they wouldn't try to reconcile any continuity. And part of it, I think, honestly, is the precedent set by the Shazam situation. Because when Captain Marvel came over, you're right. It was outselling Superman. It was outselling every book in the world. So from their corporate perspective, why would we jettison all this built-in goodwill? So on its face, I understand the initial hesitancy. I really do.
Well, here's the thing. It's the same thing we've been saying about the movie side. Like, as much as we complain creatively and critically about how these films they've been doing financially, it's like, well, if you look at it from a corporate point of view, they're winning. outside of Justice League.
All right.
I mean, but it's true, right? And what does it come down to? They are making corporate decisions that don't necessarily, that kind of impede their creativity and the fact that they could probably do better if you weren't going. And that's why I see this when I see, like, when I started reading, because I went back and read like the Shazam book they brought it. I mean, they bring them back and they named the book Shazam, right? And they tried they tried to put on the cover the original Captain Marvel, and Marvel was like, nah, motherfuckers, cease and desist. You can't do that. So after like issue 15, they had to stop doing that. So it's like they knew what they were trying to do, and it's just like, it's so blatant, and it's, like I said, it's a mess. Like, going through this entire thing, it's not as much of a mess as Hawkman. Because at least it's nowhere near that, because nothing's nothing. I mean, at least for the I mean, there's two different Hawkmen.
People need to realize how much I didn't want to do the Hawkman episode.
Right. And yes, it was your idea. That's the crazy thing about it.
It was my idea. I was like, that was a horrible idea. I said it out loud, like, when I said that.
Right.
That show.
Right. We're in the middle of the show, and you're just like, yo, why are we doing this? But like, you're right. It's not as bad as Hawkman, but it gives me a lot of Hawkman vibes. You're like, oh, you're grasping at straws. Like, you can literally see at point when they're grasping at straw to see what will catch on, and they want to. And I'm just like some of the things are really good. Like, we're going to hit this when we get into I think it's The Power of Shazam. I like that series. Like, I think that's probably the series they probably should have led with when they came out in the 70s, brought the character back. So let's jump into this. So we're going to start in the 40s to go back to the Fawcett years. Again, we covered some of this in the History of Comics episode, so we skip over. So some things you want to listen to in conjunction with this. The first part of our History of Comics Character Corner that was done in January. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. And then you want to go back and try to find, again, if you're like using something like RS Radio, you can easily search the Character Corner feed. Find the Black Adam Character Corner we did, because we did that years ago. It's weird to say years ago when we were doing the Character Corner, but yeah.
It's just like, we've reached a point with this show where I'm asking a lot of questions about myself. So the History of Comics Golden Age episode was episode number 68.
Okay. Yeah, go back to that one.
It's fairly recent.
Yeah.
And then Black Adam, give me 1 second to try to find this one here.
That one
was early, because that was the beginning of your villain agenda, you problematic character, you.
Yes, that was like early 2016 or something like that.
1, 2, 3, 4. It's before number 5, 6, 7, 8. It's episode 9.
Oh shit!
It's 9. November 29th, 2015. Oh,
boy. Yeah,
we've been doing this way longer than we thought.
Yeah, we've been doing this way longer than we thought. So, holy shit. So anyway, so we're jumping right into this. Whiz Comics number 2, released December 1939. The writer was Bill Parker, and the artist was C.C. Beck. And one thing I noticed when I looked at that cover, and again, I think we're gonna get to the lawsuit later on. It's such a fucking frivolous lawsuit. One of the similarities.
It's not frivolous.
It kind of is, though. It is.
We'll talk about it. Okay. I will fight you. I'm not going to fight you, but I will disagree with you respectfully.
Okay. So the similarity to the Action Comic number 1, though, is kind of funny, because Superman is holding up a car, and Captain Marvel is smashing the car on his cover. So that is kind of. I'll give you that one. Okay. All
right. Hold on. So I'm going to do this now. I'm going to defend this now. They did it better.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Yeah. They did the concept.
That's why it worked so well.
Yeah. The concept is done.
You have to remember that they backed into making Superman Superboy and the Adventures of Superman when he was a child, and like alternate universes and Legion of superheroes and all these alternate Earths where Superman's 12 because they needed a way to capture the youthful imagination. And before they even tried to jump in those hoops, Fawcett was like, "Well, what if we just made him a kid?"
Yeah, it's give me super.
Should we do the bio and the origins and the powers?
Yeah, we'll go into that. But like Roscoe Fawcett said, basically, give me Superman. Only have his identity be a 10 to 12-year-old boy rather than a man. That was it. Like
that's it.
That's it. I mean it.
It's not rocket science. It's just like one of those things. Like, hey, who are we selling to? A bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Why don't we make a kid the star?
Yeah. And again, going back to the character corner we did before. Remember, at this time, all the kid superheroes were all sidekicks.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, as a kid, you wanted to be Batman. You didn't want to be Robin. You didn't want to be the sidekick. Here, you could get to be Billy Batson, who turns into Captain Marvel, turned into the chiseled, chinned hero with all these superpowers, right? Like that's what you get to be. You get to, you get to have those images of looking into the mirror and the mirror reflection is Captain Marvel. That's like every kid's dream. That's gonna sell like a motherfucker, and it did, So, so let's go quickly. Like you said before, let's go quickly into the power set. The powers again. So we had a little conversation up front, and we'll be talking more about this as we go through. Character's name is not Shazam. The Shazam is from the actual wizard who gave Billy Batson the powers of Captain Marvel, and the Shazam spells out as the wisdoms of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed and flight of Mercury. And it all spells out Shazam. And let's see if I can get this correctly, because it's changed every now and then a little bit, but I believe in the early golden ages, Billy Batson was just some street orphan on the street selling newspapers. He gets again. All right, this is the 40s, so you can do this. But I swear to God, in 2019, if I read a comic where a shadowy figure lures a young boy down to the subway,
it's got to work out eventually, or they'd all stop following these shadowy figures.
Right.
I think that this still holds up.
I'm just saying,
because you've got to have that story where one time it worked out for you, because otherwise,
well, it's like that episode of Family Guy when Peter's recalling back into childhood where he was told that, and some kid does that and finds out that he gets the other kid goes, the other kid gets like this wild run ride, and then Peter's like, "Oh man, I wanted to do that." Then Peter goes, and then he gets molested. It's just like it's like during the time you have all these adults telling you don't go with strangers, and here you have the comic book that sells 14 million fucking copies, telling kids, "Hey, I don't know, man, go with strangers. You might get superpowers."
That stranger might be a wizard.
It might be a wizard. So the wizard asks Billy to say his name to get his powers. Now, the Wizard Shazam has had several different origins. They're for the most part they're pretty much the same. And the wizard is sitting what eventually becomes the Rock of Eternity. I can't remember exactly in the earlier how much they blended that in the early years, in the Fawcett years. He's sitting under a granite block held up by a string. That's usually a story that's told in most telling going forward. And like I said, we brought up the Hawkman thing because just like Hawkman gets a retelling of his origin I feel like almost every decade. The same thing happens with Captain Marvel / Shazam. I will say that in this case, it's way more consistent. They never do now he's just from another fucking planet and he's a cop from a planet. Like they don't do that with.
All right.
I'm just saying.
All right.
I'm just giving them a little credit.
I'm stepping in here just so I can say this one time. The current Hawkman run is very good.
I know you said that. I know.
And I waited a year, Chris. I waited 12 issues. Brian Hitch is drawing it. It's beautiful. And they reconcile kind of all the history. They try to make it make sense. It's basically what you wanted Bendis to have actually done with his run. Yeah, everything happened. Everything counts. That's all I'm going to say now.
Which, to be fair, they've been doing that with the Rebirth. Like they've
been giving writers a chance to reconcile the histories, and I think that freedom and that ability is really shown through talent wise.
Right, and that's a good thing. So, the ancient wizard, I'm gonna say Egyptian wizard because we also go back to he gives powers to Black Adam. Uses his power to fight the forces of evil, well over 5,000 years old. Again, in most tellings, he's given. He dies after giving his powers to Billy. That changes a little bit with, not even a little bit, changes with the power of Shazam, but we'll get back into that I think that's the late 80s, early 90s. Also, again, we said he's also the one who gave Black Adam his powers. They play around with a little bit that the different characters. So between Billy, Adam, and then we'll get to Mary in a bit. They each say Shazam to get the powers. It's different gods for each one of them. I think we went through the gods for the Black Adam one. I didn't write that one down for Mary. But the ones I mentioned for Captain Marvel are there. I've already mentioned those. We mentioned the Rock of Eternity, his magical home base. Again, in the power of Shazam, it's formed from 2 rock formations that traps the 3 faces of evil. We'll get into that later when we get down the line. Yeah, I think that's it.
We'll talk about something that happens early, like you said, the sharing of powers.
Yes, let's do that.
And this was a book where they said, well, if one kid's superhero is good, more will be better. And the sales backed it up. Because it wasn't just Billy Batson who turned into Captain Marvel. In 1941, they introduced the Lieutenant Marvels, 3 other boys whose names happened to be fucking Billy Batson.
Which was insane.
Turned into, I guess, what?
That was insane. I was like, what the fuck is this? They're all named Billy Batson.
Dude, they all get reading back and go, wait a second.
They all get kidnapped because we were trying to get Billy. It's just fucking ridiculous.
It's really bad. Captain Marvel Jr., who is the alter ego of a fellow like orphan newsboy who's also disabled, Freddie Freeman.
Oh, Freddie Freeman. Yeah, Freddie Freeman was the former jock football player. Was out fishing with his dad when he gets caught in the middle of a fight between Captain Marvel and, again, for those who say comic books shouldn't get into politics, I think the name is Captain Nazi.
Chris, you don't know what Captain Nazi's a very fine person. Don't let his name define him.
Captain Nazi kills Freddy's grandfather and cripples Freddy. And Billy and Mary have to share their powers with Freddy to help save his life. And he becomes Captain Marvel Jr. by invoking his power by saying Captain Marvel, not Shazam. So I know.
Which creates a lot of things where he can't say his name and becomes like a hilarious in-joke. He can't say his own name in the comic books, which comes to like a charming, like kind of weird piece of trivia. And then they gave it to the main character and my head exploded. Anyway, I'm so like, we're going to get to that. I'm really upset about it. Also, because these things were offshoots and so successful, the offshoots, of course, would not stop there. There was also the Hoppy the Marvel Bunny. I'm not kidding.
Oh, well, there's also Tawny, Talkie the...
Talking Tawny? Oh, no, the Talking Tawny was a mainline character. So was Uncle Marvel, who had no powers. It was Billy's, like, I guess, Alfred.
Which was hilarious, by the way.
Hilarious.
Like there's an issue. So real quick before we go to there, we got to go back to Mary Bromfield. In New 52, she's just Billy's foster care sister. We'll get to that. But in every other continuity, she's actually Billy's actual sister, and they were separated when their parents died. And she becomes Mary Marvel, and she can use that power by saying Shazam. So, again, so now you got Mary Marvel, you got Captain Marvel. They both can get their powers by saying Shazam. Then you got Freddie Freeman, who gets his powers by saying Captain Marvel. So, yeah, just get that out of the way. So, anyway, going back to Uncle Marvel, who has no powers, who you literally watch change into his costume.
Right.
It's all cheesy. It's all cheesy.
The appropriate reaction.
It's all cheesy, but it worked. I want to say it's all cheesy. It worked, though. It worked.
It worked. It worked for then. It worked for then. Why wouldn't it work for then?
Yeah, it worked for then. It worked for the 40s and early 50s, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Who else we got in the family? Do you want to get into before we
I think I touched on a lot of the family.
Yeah, we'll get into the extended
early family. The family, and so this is something that's interesting. So it's baked in from the origins and early on, whereas other superheroes would, in year 2 or 3 of their existence, get super either teenage versions of themselves or sidekicks.
Mm-hmm.
The Marvel family just expanded, and so in contrast with Captain Marvel, when Billy Batson, or excuse me, when Mary Brumfield and when Freddie Freeman said their magic words, they became superpowered as well, but they were still kids.
Right.
And that would allow even a larger audience to say, oh, not only am I the secret identity, I'm also the hero.
And there's also this interesting thing they did too, where it's a power sharing thing where if Freddie and Mary use their powers, then it also kind of takes away from the full power set of Billy as Captain Marvel if he's using them. So it's like that power divides over whoever's using the powers. It's a finite set of power, and Billy is allowed to kind of basically share that with others. And so you're right. It kind of gets into this idea of not only do I see myself in there, but at any point, Billy Batson can share his powers with me, and I can become part of the Captain Marvel family too, right? Anybody, it's right. Quietly, it's like, and again, I'm not trying to say it could have ever gotten to that point and last as long, but it's quietly the idea of the Spider-Man can be anybody.
Chris, it's the idea of all of this. It's the idea that something that emerged in the 90s, and this is something that it hit me as I was doing research, was the idea of the I could be the hero, the Ash Ketchums in Pokemon, the all those did like those shows where they're like, oh, this character is different. They all do the same thing, but this character is just better at it. You could be that too. This is the beginning of that. This is the first one of those because, hey, man, if I'm a kid, man, if only Captain Nazi would kill my grandfather, maybe I too could be a Marvel.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh at that.
I know.
I shouldn't laugh at that, but like, it's true though. It's true though. It's so fucking true. It's like, I was like, wait, is that on the nose? Is that really Captain Nazi? I was like, how dare? What the fuck? but if you think about it, go back to our Golden Age thing. There's another reason why you can point to why Captain Marvel took off, right? What characters from DC did not purposely stayed out of the war?
Superman and Batman.
Here you have Captain Marvel, who's one of his enemies, is now Captain Nazi. And oh, by the way, this young crippled boy ends up becoming, Superpower 2 to then basically become, like Captain Nazi basically becomes his main bad guy to take on.
Yep.
And so now you have a young, it's like, you're going to print money with that. So,
particularly given the time and place. Yeah. None of it was a mistake.
Yeah. So, let's go into some of the enemies, and then we'll kind of get into this lawsuit, and then jump over to what happens when we move over to DC. We've already kind of mentioned Captain Nazi here, Marvel Master Comics 21 and Whiz Comic number 25.
I cannot believe that's a thing still. And for the record, Captain Nazi still appears in mainstream.
No, he does. Like I was shocked by that. I was like, when they removed Captain Nazi from animation when I was reading The Powers of Shazam, I was like, oh, they're really about to do. Just to give a heads up, The Powers of Shazam basically does a retelling of the Whiz Comic with it feels like the Whiz Comic stuff, but it also feels like it to me is a good merging of the original.
It's a layer of modern sensibilities too,
right? And it's very, very modern, but also doesn't go too dark as the Roy Thompson stuff did and the limited series he did. Done really, really well. And they resurrected Captain Nazi. I was like, are they bringing back Captain Nazi?
Captain Nazi appears in that Batman Under the Red Hood arc.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
When Jason takes his eyes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So Whiz Comic 25, which also the first appearance of Freddie Freeman and Captain Marvel Jr. Dr. Savannah, who this is going to be your villain in the upcoming Captain Marvel movie. There are being a Shazam movie. So there are.
You did it.
I know. I'm in the Fawcett years. I'm still allowed to call him Captain Marvel. So there are different versions of where I think it's Thaddeus Savannah fits into this. There's some version when they bring him into DC, I believe that he's the uncle of Billy, who takes Billy, the unknown uncle of Billy. Other times he's just, a greedy doctor who's searching out for things. Genius. And then I think there's another version too, but I can't remember which one that is. One of the more, again, I'm about to say one of the more weirder villains, and mind you, we just did Captain Nazi. Mr. Mind.
Mr. Mind's awesome, and I say that because I'm a huge fan of 52.
I'm not saying
so. That's my definitive Mr. Mind story.
I'm not saying
because otherwise, Mr. Mind is a ridiculous character.
It is an alien worm, has the body of a lowly worm, the conscience of Hitler, and the brain of a genius. He is a genius alien worm with a talk box. With a talk box.
It's the best part of the character.
It is so, but I think the thing about these characters, they're so fun and ridiculous. Like, there's not another set of characters that's so absurd, maybe the Flash, right? It has just some fucking absurd, but the Flash doesn't have an alien worm. He doesn't. Obviously, there's Black Adam. What was it? There's another one. What was it? Iback. What was that? It was like he has the
back. Yep.
He has the powers of, I think, Ivan the Terrible. Oh God, I can't remember. Let me see if I can bring these up.
Yeah, it's very contrived, but it's there.
Yeah, it's so like on the nose.
Which is kind of the appeal of these early, especially the Whiz Bang comics. Like, this is it. It's kind of what they asked for.
Yeah, Ivan the Terrible, Cesar Borgia, is the Attila the Hun, and Caligula. It's like, what the fuck are we doing here, guys? What are we doing? Just is empowered by four of the most terrifying and evil men that ever walked the earth. It's just I love you so much. And then as we go through this, there's other villains here as well, and as you go further down and get more modern, like I want to say, particularly in the New 52 run, I'm assuming that they're doing the same thing in Rebirth. They lean more heavily into the magic, with the villains and with Captain Marvel himself and where he fits into the universe. I think that's another thing too. When they got to bring him onto DC, they were trying to they didn't have a place for him. You know, well, you're in Fawcett. It's pretty simple. That's the character. That's the world. Don't have to worry about it. When you bring him into DC, it's like you're trying to find a world for him. I think it takes him a while to kind of figure out that, hey, magic, it's there. Use lean on that. So I can't, like, it can't be understated that they ran a shit ton of comics for this, and we are not going to obviously spend a lot more time on this. I think we spent more time than I thought we were going to spend on this. I will make sure there is there are several collected editions that if you want to go back and read some of the early Fawcett editions of these, I mean, they're from the 40s and 50s. So
yes,
do with that what you will. I mean, they're from the 40s and 50s. I don't know.
Your mileage will vary.
Your mileage would vary a lot on that one. Okay. So, but they've collected some editions of these, so you can go back and read those. So, but let's jump into what happened with this not frivolous lawsuit.
It's not frivolous because, well, the entity that would become DC Comics looked across the street and said, "What the hell?" They sued Fawcett and Republic Pictures in 1941, saying that Captain Marvel was based on Superman. 7 years of litigation later, it finally went to trial in 48. And I think, honestly, this is kind of what your anger at DC echoes the judge. Because the judge found that Captain Marvel wasn't an infringement, but that DC was negligent in copywriting Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And it was decided that National, because they hadn't copywritten those strips, they abandoned the concept. So, verdict said Fawcett's got it. Of course, DC appeals, and DC ends up winning. Maybe the character wasn't infringement, but specific things he did were infringements.
Which, that's where it's like...
Well, honestly, and this is where the muddy part is, but what really muddies it is the fact that National was just a bigger fucking company than Fawcett.
Well, and that's what I think, and I also think that for as much as we can say that, and again, I think that this maybe it's not frivolous, but I definitely do think it's an example of a big company kind of stepping on a little company, and while I wouldn't shy away from, I
that.
wouldn't shy away from saying that Superman was an inspiration for Captain Marvel. When you look at what Captain Marvel was dealing with and what Superman was dealing with, it was kind of two different things. And it's not to say that they didn't take some of the things that Captain Marvel was doing and take them for Superman. You know, he could fly before Superman could. You know, his main villain, Dr. Sivana, was bold. Guess who comes in later on is bold? Lex Luthor. It's like there are things that went back and forth there. But I also think they played in two different worlds. I just think that National looked at it and was like, they're beating us. We got to do something to stop them. Because, you know, again, Fawcett didn't shy away from having Captain Marvel getting involved in politics and dealing with Nazis and things like that. Like, it's Billy Batson, in those first issues, leverages his being, and again, this is why I get the Spider-Man feel for it. He leverages his being Captain Marvel into getting a radio deal to be on Whiz Radio. And he becomes a journalist through the radio. So, and again, Clark Kent is a journalist for the day. But it's like, it's two different things. One's radio, one is actually being a writer. It's like, the things are there, but to me, it's one of those things that I think today, it doesn't go anywhere because it's like, they're different enough. Like, you do.
But is there a distinction without being a difference? I honestly see DC's point.
Oh, I see their point. Don't get me wrong. I see their point. I just think they're fucking wrong.
I don't think it's tied to the fact that their character's less successful than the photocopy.
Oh, absolutely.
The photocopy was just outperforming theirs, and that's honestly, I think, was the source of all the consternation.
Oh, let me go back and say to basically something we said at the beginning of the we were kind of saying when we started this whole thing. It's like, I'm totally against them. I'm like, fuck them. But if I was in their shoes, I totally understand. Like,
wow,
right? I mean, look. If she was on the
I'd bill them to death. We're gonna lawyer you to death.
Right. I just like, you know, if you can't beat them, sue them. You know, and that's what this was. It absolutely was. And so they removed, Fawcett ended up having to pay, I think, like a $400,000 fine, and Shudder shortly after that. You know, that was the end of it. And so there's no Captain Marvel. I think that was, what was that? What was the date of that?
The date was, let me say here, it settled out of court 1953. It shut down its comics division.
All right, so they shut down the comic division in 1953. So it gets relaunched by DC because once again, going with the got to make money and we get something up. They decide they were going to license the characters from Fawcett, and I believe it was 1977.
72 is when the license, or 67, excuse me, is when Marvel put theirs out, and they licensed the characters from Fawcett in 72.
72. So almost 20 years later. You know?
Because part of the settlement in 53 was they could never again publish characters as part of that settlement.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what they did was they said, "Look, we've got this money. We can sell off this character." And so I know there's a nerd listening to this right now who's screaming, "What about Marvelman?" And I promise you, I will do 5 minutes on it later. I'm not doing a podcast on Miracleman. I swear to God, I'm not. But I will do 5 minutes on it later. Just bear with us. Because that's what happened. They started licensing out the rights to these powers and these stories. Mm-hmm. And they got broken. They're like, fuck it. Just give up the whole property to get it back in print and license the entire thing to DC.
Yep. So Carmine and Infantino, they licensed the character back to Fawcett. They even brought back in C.C. Beck to illustrate.
Which, by the way, if you're just a quick aside, if you're a Flash television show fan, C.C. Jitters is named after him. That's just fun factoid from Dpalm on a Sunday or Saturday. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Normally we do this on Sunday, so it's fine.
Yeah, very confusing.
And so this goes back to what I was saying before. I think this is where DC made their first point. Because at this point now, you have Marvel has already had has Marvel. They have the Captain Marvel name. They're printing a book as Captain Marvel. You know, DC has now licensed all of the Marvel family from Fawcett, but they are now not allowed to publish a book with that name. And so the book they use, they call it Shazam. And they try to throw on the original Captain Marvel, but Marvel's like, you beautiful idiots. Hell fucking no. You're not going to do that. We're not doing that right now.
I want to say right now, worth a shot.
I mean, you got to try it, right?
I'm not. Guess what? Now those issues that have that on there are worth fucking big money.
Oh yeah. Don't get me wrong. I like, they had to change the name Shazam 15. So up until the issue 15, it was launched with the original Captain Marvel as a subtitle. They changed it to The World's Mightiest Mortal after that. But it's still called Shazam, and it goes back to my original point. It's like 20 years has passed. I think what they're trying to do, and again, from a corporate point of view, it's not a bad idea, right? These characters sold big, and we're fucking kicking our asses back then. We're now having them. We can now print these same stories. And again, I want to say those first 33 issues of when DC relaunches is pretty much them either reprinting or reimagining the early run. Right. They didn't change a goddamn thing. And to be perfectly honest, I think all of that was a mistake. I think that from that point of view, they had to do it. They had to try it, but I think it was a mistake.
It's interesting to watch, because you and I do this a lot. We talk about the history of comics and history of particularly these two big companies. It's interesting to see what DC learned from this. Mm-hmm. Because when they bring over the Charlton Comics characters, mm-hmm. They change the name, but they don't try to plug in those original backstories. They even go so far as to spin them off and tell versions of them which would become Watchmen. Mm-hmm. So that was the original rumor. So originally the rumor was Watchmen was written with the Charlton characters in mind, and they were going to be used, but DC didn't want to make it a in-continuity story, so they took them a little bit left and made the characters. So like obviously Captain Atom is Dr. Manhattan, Blue Beetle is Night Owl, so on and so forth. The Question is Rorschach. It's one of those things where I think that they learned from this experience.
No, I agree with that, because basically what they do here is they bring over they basically say, when you read that those first issues, is basically Billy, Freddie, and Mary were stuck in suspended animation, and the entire world was basically stuck in suspended animation and didn't age, and they bring them for like 20 years, and they just plopped them down. It was like, here it is again. We're here now, and they pick up where they last left off, and I think they were trying to play on picking up where they left off, but you got to think about the kids that were reading Captain Marvel are now 20 years older.
Right.
And there's no connection there.
That was the miscalculation.
And that was a miscalculation. And again, it's a miscalculation that goes, again, going back to the issue, the character corner we did. Like over at Marvel, you have one guy in Stan Lee who's kind of the brains behind everything, kind of pushing all these things away. So you kind of have, it's not a corporate structure. Over at National and what you got going on here at DC, you have this corporate structure where it was a calculation. It wasn't a gut feeling. It wasn't hey, let's see what the kids out there are doing. It was 1 + 1 = 2 here. So obviously, it's gonna equal, it'll equal 2 over here, and it'll be fine. And they kind of yada a lot in between. You know what it is? They underpants gnomed it.
It's one of those things that I think you're right. It was just a massive miscalculation on their part, because, and we've talked about this in both the Stanley Character Corner and in the comic book history, is that without a singular vision, without someone's hand always on the wheel, you can be served by you can be off trying to serve different masters. Mm-hmm. And that's what this was. Like even C.C. Beck said, he would come in and try to punch up a story with his art, but he felt like with the revival there was no punching it up, particularly when DC's lack of a singular creative head did not allow them to try to integrate these characters into stories. It said, oh no, they're going to be continuation. They're going to be cordoned off on their own Earth S. Mm-hmm. And you got to remember, when this character came back, there was a lot of fanfare, but you can only ride the hype train so long, and it fell off.
Yeah. And you see that often with what happens with Shazam, Captain Marvel going forward is...
I'm sorry, but DC, I was thinking about this. Even think about the milestone stuff. Mm-hmm. every time the milestone characters are used, it's like a big event and there's headlines. Guys, you could have just made them part of the fucking universe. Which is one of the reasons I like Young Justice, honestly.
Right.
Because they're just there.
Yeah. So you coordinate all, you bring these characters in, and basically for a cash grab, and then you coordinate them all from the rest of your. I mean, it is. It is. And again, from a corporate point of view, not a bad strategy, right? But it limits what you can do with the creatively, and to me, it's something that Shazam and Captain Marvel, whatever you want to call them, has not recovered from. They have not recovered from this. It feels like they're still trying to find a place for the character, down to the fact that sometimes like the character kind of just disappears.
Vanishes.
Right? Vanishes. Like New 52, he's there, and I thought for the longest time there's a New 52 series, and it's not. It's just it's
the backup of the Justice League.
It's the backup of a Justice League comic. What the fuck?
So that's the other thing about this character, and we're stopping our background look just for a second to kind of look at some tropes that have happened. A lot of starting to stop with this character.
Well, and that's where I brought in the Hawkman thing. It's not as bad as Hawkman because you can follow it, but there's a lot of starting and then. But
the more you follow it, the grosser it looks. Like, wait, what am I watching?
It's like, what is your theme? What are you trying to do? And I feel like because it starts with this 77 to 72 revival of Shazam and them not understanding where they wanted this character to fit in the universe. They wanted the money and they wanted to replicate that and replicate that those fans coming in, you know, because again, at this point, remember, we had talked about this. At this point, Marvel's hitting on every fucking cylinder, right? Marvel, I don't remember the year. This might be the point when Marvel started to take some of the market share away from them. But I do know at this point, you know, we've gone through a 3-year period of Stan Lee and crew creating things like the X-Men, the Avengers, Iron Man, like those 10 characters we listed out in that character corner we did. He's created all of those in that span of time. So now you have DC over going like, oh fuck, we need to catch up with something.
It just became real fucking urgent.
Well, and not only that, remember we also have Spider-Man, which again goes back to my idea of I don't think at the time you have somebody at DC, character-wise, that matches up with Spider-Man where it's a young child who is the hero. Not a sidekick, doesn't serve as a sidekick, is just the hero. So here you go, you bring back in Captain Marvel's like, that was the character. Like, Marvel's basically doing our character. Not only top of that, but going back to our first Captain Marvel thing here, I want to say this might be it might be the time. Is this the time when Rick Jones is already bonded with Marvel? It might be.
It's got to be, yeah.
It might be.
That happened, I think it was 25 issues in.
Yeah.
And that series started in 67.
Right. So here.
We're in 73, yeah.
So here you're now watching as Marvel has a young character, this young teenage character in Spider-Man, but then they're now rubbing it in your face and have taken Captain Marvel, the Captain Marvel name, and has now taken Marvel and bonds him with a young Rick Jones, and Rick Jones invokes Captain Marvel, invokes Marvel with all these powers by what? Banging his wrists together. He doesn't say a name, but bangs his wrists together, and all of a sudden, as a young boy, he turned into, you know, Captain, transfers in with Captain. It's different enough, but you're like, fuck.
But I love that you bring that up because we'll talk about Miracleman and Marvelman later, but it gives a layer of nuance to the concept because it's not just he turns into Captain Marvel. Yeah. They switch places. And so it's a distinct, separate entity, which is interesting because, like, you read some of the Geoff Johns stuff, and when Captain Marvel's like hitting on Stargirl, like they are peers technically, but it is weird.
Yeah, and so Marvel's done this thing where they've taken the concepts, but have kind of flipped it on its head and made it different enough so they're safe from any suing. And now DC looks like they're coming in the back end trying to revive a character that did it first. It's like the episode of the Family Guy, The Simpsons did it. Or no, was it that South Park, right? Simpsons did it. It's like that's what this is. Like, wait, Fawcett did it. Wait, no, Fawcett already did that. Wait, fuck it. Just, hey, give me those characters. Bring those characters in. We're gonna do it now. And we're gonna do it, and we're gonna make that same money. All that money that Marvel's making over there with these characters, we're gonna do it now with Shazam, even though we can't use the Captain Marvel name. And unfortunately, it doesn't always pan out. It it's been too late, and I think this is the mistake they made going forward. I think they were just too late. One probably should have worked something better out with Fawcett.
Facts.
Probably should have worked something out with Fawcett. But two, by the time they realized their mistake, it was already too late, and they were now seeing. It's like, again, it's the Android thing. When Android users sit there and go, "We've had that feature that iPhones had before." It's like nobody gives a fuck. Nobody
Android, like no one cares.
Nobody gives a fuck. You can say, all right, Apple's over there doing the same thing you've done. They're doing it later and charging more for it. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares, right? And that's what happened here. So you mentioned before that they put the characters on their own Earth S, I believe. So we have Crisis on Infinite Earths that then ends up uniting the DC worlds and finally brings the Marvel families into one Earth. And
this should have made things so much simpler. The more we do DC characters, we're more like, wait, when was Crisis's point?
Yeah, you know what I've decided? Since we're getting that crossover this year, I think maybe the end of the year.
No.
We should do Crisis. Maybe we should do all the Crisis in one big character corner. Because you want to know why? Because what I want to do is every time you do a DC character that
we have to reference.
You have to reference Crisis. So at this point, I'd rather do it and just do it one big episode and just tell everybody, hey, go back and listen to episode 89. And just go back and listen to that. All that stuff is there, and we can yada yada it going forward. Because
I'm way too nervous to see if you already figured out what number it's supposed to be. I hope that you just made that number.
I made the number up, but we'll see.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I made that number up. So,
if it's 89, I may quit the podcast.
I might quit with you. All right. And to be fair, I don't think it is, but shit, it might be. Depends on how many we do between now and then.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions.
Good God. Mark the time of the podcast, folks. If we end up doing that Crisis podcast on number 89, holy shit. Anyway, So they finally bring them in together. I think shortly after that, they have there's a story called Legends, which brings Captain Marvel into the Justice League, and he's in those books there. I don't believe there might be some like one-off series here and there. I don't think there is anything in between this and the Shazam: A New Beginning from Roy Thompson.
Okay, so here's the things that happened in here. So in the late 80s, it's Legends. He appears in Legends. They put him in Justice League, and it's like, and so he appears in the Justice League when they do like the like Keith Giffen and JJ DeMatteis Justice League. Mm-hmm. So concurrently with once Legends ended, that's when New Beginning happens.
Okay. And that's from Roy Thompson and Dean Thompson. You'll know that name, Roy Thompson, because guess what?
Roy Thomas.
Roy Thomas. Guess what he wrote? Captain Marvel for Marvel. Yeah. But here's the thing. So this was I believe this was a graphic novel or a short miniseries. I can't remember which one it was.
It was a 4-issue, like painted. Was it painted?
I think the covers. I know the covers were painted because the same thing happens with Power Shazam.
Oh, Power Shazam is the one where the whole thing's painted.
Yeah, the whole. I love the. I'm not gonna lie. I love those painted.
It's beautiful.
It's
beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful.
Yeah, New Beginning. Issue mini.
Right. And so they kind of relaunched Captain Marvel. And this goes back to what I said about. Let's see. This is Dr. Savannah. He is Billy's uncle, and he gets Billy when Billy's parents die. The book. I mean, so first let me go. I don't know. I know. Was this a maxi series?
One of those oversized ones.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not
sure if it was or not. But so, but this. So Roy Thomas wrote this, and this was dark as fuck. Like, it was almost too dark. Like Billy's parents, like the beginning of the book ends with Billy's parents dying and him living with his uncle Dudley, who's a magician. And they find out that his parents died. He was going to try to. Thaddeus Savannah comes in. Turned out he's a lost uncle of Billy. I think it's his sister's brother, I believe he was. And sues to have custody of Billy, even though he's been out of his life. Turns out he's just after the Billy's father. The money. He's going to try to send Billy off to a military camp or something like that. Excuse me. Billy, he ends up getting. Billy ends up running away. That's when he ends up once again, strange man. Strange man tells Billy to come down, gets the powers of Shazam. The same general story here. The difference is this is also a thing. Savannah is building a machine that pulls Black Adam out of this banishment that the Wizard of Shazam had put him in. Again, it's you can see this is supposed to be the beginning of a larger story. But there were some creative issues that Roy Thompson had with the editors, and it never goes.
So I didn't know about this till I researched this about the Thomas's plans.
Yeah, like it was like he was going to it was going to be African American Freddie Freeman. I think Mary's going to be like some goth chick or something.
It was going to be punks out Mary Marvel.
Yeah. It was going to be very, very.
Which probably happened during Countdown in Final Crisis.
Yeah, it was. Oh, and another big, and I think this is probably the biggest change is that, and this is the one thing that they did keep that stuck, was that when Billy turns into Captain Marvel, Marvel maintains Billy's maturity and personality. Because before, we didn't mention
he's able to access the wisdom of Solomon, but he doesn't always automatically do so.
Right, and so that was the thing. Like in previous versions, when Billy turns into Captain Marvel, he accesses the wisdom of Solomon, but he also acts like a more mature adult, right?
It was treated almost more like Marvel and Rick.
Right, exactly. It was kind of treated that way, right? With a different personality. Here, it's more like, and if you never read any of these books, but you did watch Young Justice, it's like that Captain Marvel. Like
honestly, it's like our Captain Marvel now. That's how Captain Marvel's been treated, and that's one of the things that Roy Thomas did. Is that I would have, and it's interesting because having done all these characters back to back, you get to see how they take their ideas and change them. So Roy Thomas said, as opposed to them being separate entities, I'm going to marry it and then have that be one of the conflicts of the series.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually pretty interesting, and it's one of the traits that you said has carried on since 1986.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's sad to hear that DC got in the way of the plan, because it sounds like the plan's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think that when you look at it, the Roy Thomas Shazam this was going to be the most different version. Like this is the one that didn't follow really the Fawcett model of how these characters went. It was going to be it was definitely the most different. And
calling it a new beginning was a very apt title.
I think he wrote this one. Oh, he wrote the little thing with Captain Nazi as well, where Captain Nazi was basically created by a neo-Nazi organization called the Sons of Valhalla.
Yeah, he updated Captain Nazi.
Right, which again, it was all very. You know what it is? This is the New 52 version versus before New 52, where you kind of update the characters for the modern sensibility and then plop them into a real world situation. Because it makes sense, right? In that world of the late 80s, a neo-Nazi organization. Because basically what happens is Billy is still working as a journalist under Whiz, and finds out that somebody, as Captain Marvel, I think he ends up fighting some guy, and the guy dies. And it turns out that the guy's uncle or something like that, the dude's son is being recruited by the Sons of Valhalla. So Billy goes undercover as a recruit, and it's so heavy handed. Like they got things on the board, it's not like kill the niggers or something like that, but it's kill all the black.
It's the Warner equivalent,
right? The Warner equivalent of this, and you're like, this is actually kind of fucked up. And these kids, and their final mission to go out there and poison the water supplies and different things. Like it's a very it's a very real storyline goes on here. That's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it was a 4-part story. They did it in like I said, I like what we're going to cover next, which is the Power of Shazam, which I think does a good job of marrying some of the things that Roy Thomas was doing and keeping with the Whiz Comics sensibilities and look and feel of some of these and storylines. But I would have loved to see what Roy Thomas would have kept going.
Yeah, I'm about to say, like as we got deeper into this, I was like, I too, just from nostalgia and for lots of other reasons, love Power Shazam.
Mm-hmm.
But New Beginnings is where I like almost shocked my reading. I was like, God damn, I want to read that. I want to read more of that.
Yeah, I was mad. I was upset because I was like, oh wow, you get the 4-part story and then there's nothing else after, and you're just like, but that would have been kind of cool. And then again, when you read what he was planning on doing with the series going forward,
that made me angrier.
Yeah, you were like, oh wow, he's going to introduce, like I said, Freddie Freeman was going to be African American, and you're going to have do the cyberpunk thing with Mary. Like all of this stuff was kind of interesting. You're like, man, I would have. Damn it, DC! Like it, and again, to me, it's the freshest take that they've done on Shazam / Captain Marvel.
If I may, before or since.
Mm-hmm. You said what?
If I may, I'm just saying before or since. The freshest take.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Because I have thoughts on the new 52 version.
We will talk.
So in 95 they do 94 they do a graphic novel called The Power of Shazam, and they basically undo all the stuff they did. Again, there's a lot of undoing and redoing with Shazam's history, but I believe that the Power of Shazam versions and what they do here probably are the ones that last the longest up until Flashpoint. I want to say, for the most part, they keep this origin going forward, and rightly so. It's written by Jerry Ordway, I believe that's his name.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say,
yep.
Jerry Ordway. The 4-part series kind of redoes everything, and the first thing they do is, it again, going with the Spider-Man analogy here, and doing this, they kind of go back and goes like, well, let's examine Billy's parents and bring them into this story, and kind of show almost kind of what Marvel did later on with Spider-Man and his parents, and trying to make them CIA agents and stuff like that. Here they made Ordway basically makes it makes Billy's parents archaeologists, and they're on a dig for Dr. Savannah with Adam. And they end up getting killed when Adam goes crazy and tries to take an artifact that kills both his parents. He then Adam then takes Mary with him because they had brought Mary with them on the dig in Egypt. He takes Mary, gives Mary to his sister to raise, and Billy is left to be raised by his uncle Ebenezer, who takes the bonds and stocks that Billy's father left for him and kicks Billy out in the streets. And that's how Billy becomes an orphan. And the entire series basically revolves around that opening, that 4-issue opening, which basically kind of goes over what happened with that early setup of Billy's parents dying, Billy's Billy getting his powers as Captain Marvel, and then taking on Adam as Black Adam. Like that happens in that four issues, and then the 47, because there is a 48th issue, we'll get into that later. The 47 issues after, when they do the ongoing series, is this long story that kind of connects everything, that hits on different beats from the original character. So you get Mary getting her powers, you get Freddie Freeman getting his powers, you get all this stuff going forward, but there's a long story that's being told here. And one of the big things they change is Shazam, the wizard, doesn't die. And basically at one point he comes out to live with the real world with Billy as kind of like his uncle for a little bit. But it's a really, really well done long form story being told here.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know. I thought it was, so as someone who now has a closer hue to the Roy Thomas stuff, I remember reading this at the time and liking it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a character that really resonated with me, but they're always well done stories. Like you said, there's always it appealed to the serial storyteller in me. Someone would like to see a story told over a long stretch. Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about the very key alternate reality version of him that appears in this time as well. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, what they do here is they It's Seeds of World, and it's something that I believe that the other series never did, right? Because the other series either and leaving out the Roy Thomas stuff, because that definitely did Seeds of the World. It's Seeds of the World that we unfortunately never got to see. So you take the Roy Thomas stuff out, everything else before this, it still felt like they were trying to find a way and a place to put Shazam, Captain Marvel, whatever, the Marvel family, where to put them, how they fit them into world. They never built anything off of it, and nothing continued. So when one series ended and you try to go to the next series, you basically get the retelling of the origin again, and we start all over again for fresh. And it just kept restarting. Here, when you get the power of Shazam, when you go through this, that happens. When you get down to the trials of Shazam, and Freddie Freeman becomes, and we'll get to that later, but when he becomes takes over and becomes Captain Marvel himself, you get a direct line from that to the Freddie who ends up having to fight Captain Marvel and gets the powers and is very, very upset. Like, that's one of the things that you don't get in the Fawcett comics. And I think this is where Ordway found a way to balance, Roy Thomas made a dark, kind of gritty version of some of these things. Almost, even the way some of the stuff was drawn, it was like there were times I couldn't, when looking at the Thomas series, I didn't know if I was looking at Black Adam or if I was looking at Captain Marvel, right? It's a very, very gritty thing. And when you look at some of the things he was trying to do in the future, he was going there. The Ordway stuff doesn't go that gritty, but it understood why that stuff mattered and why that would resonate with people. And so you get things like Freddie Freeman is at one point there's an issue here where, and I can't remember the issue number, Freddie goes off and basically kidnaps Captain Nazi from, I think it's the Mossad or whatnot, because they're about to, because again, he's a Nazi. He kidnaps him to go fuck up Captain Nazi himself, because he's like, yo, you crippled me and you fucking killed my grandfather, motherfucker, I'm gonna kill you. I'm
coming to kill you.
Right. And it's like, you understand that rage, right? And even with Billy and Mary, oh, you can't do that. Freddie's like, the fuck I can't, it's, and
explain to me why in short words, in small words.
Right. And so
why can't I? I need you to tell me.
Exactly. It's a very, very gripping story you get. And then there's also the stuff that you have with Shazam, where they kind of expand on his origin too. Him fathering two children after being tricked by a demon. As you have Blaze and I think it's Satanus. This is where the whole thing about the Rock of Eternity being two giant rocks that in between is sandwiching the three faces of evil. You have that in there. All that stuff in here. You have they bring in Mr. Mind. Mr. Mind is actually ends up becoming the sole survivor of a race of alien worms from Venus who are trying to invade, who are trying to invade Earth. But he's basically sent forth as a point man, and Captain Marvel ends up fighting these worms with Dr. Savannah, ends up killing all the worms, and Mr. Mind is left alone on Earth, jumping between people's ears with his own little ear ship. It's such a weird. It sounds weird. I know it sounds weird. You have, I believe, there's also a series because we didn't mention this before. Another thing, and this actually pops up in the movies, and they didn't. The movie, they're doing a horrible job promoting this movie and marketing this movie. The Seven Deadly Sins also are involved in this series. There's all these little things in here, but there's also a long story that's being told as well. That's connecting everything. Shazam can't figure out how Mary knew to invoke his name to get the powers, right? And all this stuff's going on. There's a bigger story that's being told here, and it's the first time in a long time where you feel like you have something that can seed for the character going forward throughout the rest of the DC universe. So, it's
for sure, and that's cool. I think it makes it cool to feel like a full world and full of things lived in, and it's interesting until it gets axed.
Right, and
it always seems to be.
And that's what happens, right? It then gets axed at 47. And so you're just like, the fuck, what are we? We were doing so well, but so
were we?
Well enough, right? Well enough. Let's see. What do we have here? What's next? Because again, I'm trying to.
It's really Kingdom Come in the alternate versions. It's really Geoff Johns.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So we bring in Geoff Johns and
So it's one of those things here where it's interesting because Captain Marvel's world gets invoked before Captain Marvel does sometimes, and because of, I don't know, you can point to either the rise of the anti-hero or kind of just the treatment of the character within the JSA book. This is the point in time where Black Adam starts to outstrip Captain Marvel.
Okay, so thank you, because that's the thing that got me. I was like, I'm reading this up, and even when doing this research, I was just like, it's almost like the character takes a back seat to everyone else. Not to everybody, to the world. You're right. To his world, everything else.
He's a secondary character.
And it dropped me out because when we get into this JSA run, I was like, it's weird to me that, when we did Black Adam, we did that Black Adam series, and by the time we got to near the end, we weren't really talking about Captain Marvel or the Marvel family or Shazam or anything like that. We were talking about more like Hawkman, things like that. Like, it's a very, very weird thing they did here where they kind of decoupled Black Adam, who, it is a consistent foe for Captain Marvel in all its forms, right? And yet they is heavily involved in there, but they do such a, later on in these runs in DC, they decouple him almost, not completely, but enough that he rides on his own as a larger villain, while Marvel and Shazam is just kind of like an afterthought almost.
Well, what I have to be reminded of is that during this time, the change that Roy Thomas made in keeping the boy inside the man was interesting because he could always lean on there was one point during, I think, a Thanksgiving special, Captain Marvel was invited to join the Justice League. He says, the honor is real, but the wisdom of Solomon says it's not a good idea. Once you take away a child's sensibilities and you still give them these powers, then it becomes a different layer interesting. And I think that part of it is that comics stopped being written for those 10 to 12-year-olds. And so it became much more interesting to see not just how a man, but a king would handle these powers. Because that's the other thing about Black Adam is that, and it's one of the appeals of a Black Panther and a Namor when you start, I reread a lot of Hickman this week, so here I am. Is that it's one thing to deal with a hero or villain, but when you recontextualize him as, this is not a villain, this is a nation given flesh. This is a people given direction and will. And so it's easy to say, oh, Black Adam's evil. It's harder to say Black Adam's doing what he will for his people. And there's the grays of shade that they add to the nuance that Bendis was able to bring to the character, flesh it out, and made Black Adam more resonant with, I think, the reading populace than Captain Marvel at the time. And I think there's a way to do both, as you see. As you guys know about me, my favorite MCU Phase 1 movie is still Captain America, including Avengers. Because I think if you pull off Ernest and you can do it in this day and age, it's powerful and it means something. So I think that Captain Marvel has a place in comics. I just think that place is continually, to this day, being redefined.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like you said, we this is the Geoff Johns area of stuff. So we get the GSA, we get 52. And again, I don't want to rehash this because I think we cover. I think again, a lot of it is really Black Adam heavy, and we cover that in the Black Adam series, so you can go check that out there. I mean, we introduced the Black Marvel family. We have the World War III. Like all this stuff happens around this time, and not to say there's nothing that doesn't happen that affects the Marvel family. I think the biggest thing is Day of Vengeance, which is the miniseries where Spectre goes crazy and kills Shazam.
It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of a big. Well, it's not only just that. I mean, there's a larger thing here as well, which is it also fucks with magic.
Yeah. And
I think this is also quietly when you start seeing them going, it goes back to what you were saying about trying to find the place for this character in this DC world. What do we do? And to me, the answer has always been in front of their face is magic. And when you lean on the idea that, it's not just invoking these powers and getting powers, it's magic that is granting these powers to the Captain Marvel, Shazam, and his family, and things like that. You can then play with so much stuff here. So you have Spectre killing the Wizard. And I think that's before Infinite Crisis. I couldn't get.
It's right. It's part of the kickoff.
It's part of the kickoff. Yeah, it's part of the kickoff.
It's like one of those lead up series going into Infinite Crisis was when that happens.
Right. And so what ends up happening is Billy and Marvel have to they take over the Wizard's place in the Rock of Eternity. And it doesn't really have any kind of effect right at first, other than him having being there. But that kind of leads into Judd Winnick's 12-issue series, The Trials of Shazam.
Okay, so before you and I have not discussed this, I have a personal affinity for Judd Winnick. I think he's a very good writer. What did you think about Trials of Shazam?
So here's the thing. I actually liked it because the reason why I liked it is because any other telling of Captain Marvel and how Billy gets his powers, Billy's just given those powers. Here you have Freddy, and he has to basically go through and earn those powers, and they kind of give you an understanding and a meaning of what each of those powers are. It's a little bit, it gets a little bit. It's not the greatest series in the world. I like the concept.
Formulaic, if you will.
Yeah, it's formulaic, right. But I like I like what they did with it. Right, I like the idea of Freddy. Basically, what happens is after taking Shazam's place in the Rock of Eternity, it's like, oh no, you really have to take his place. Like, you are now the wizard, Billy, and
you're the wizard now.
Yeah, you're now white haired, and there needs to be, it now gets into this idea of who's going to be the champion, and it kind of it sets the stage for fucking up some things up. For one, Mary loses her powers in the middle of a fight and gets fucked up, and nobody else can, and Freddy can't call Captain Marvel to have the powers, so he has to basically go and meet each of these gods who are now, and they reimagine the gods in present day to kind of go through these trials and earn each set of these powers. And again, it's like I said, it's very formulaic, but I like the concept of what they do, because again, going back to the Roy Thomas stuff, it's something different. It's the first time I'm like, oh, this is different. You haven't done this before. So, what do you think?
That's fair. I didn't like it. And I don't know, for me, it was just, I see everything you're saying is correct. And like, honestly, having you talk about it made me reconsider how I feel about it. Because I think part of it is that this is a character that relies so heavily on nostalgia that to push the character forward felt like a departure.
Yeah.
And if you're going to push him forward, I would like you to try something different than something where it feels like a formula.
Yeah. I mean, this is literally.
I think for me, that was my issue.
It's literally the formula of the sidekick takes over the man.
Oh, it's very cut and paste.
Yeah, it's that storyline, right? And so, but you're absolutely right. It's and so, especially if you also can think about what they were doing with the Roy Thomas stuff, you're like, well, you guys had an opportunity to go bold, and now we're going here and we're changing things up, but it's a very, very straightforward. I mean, it's so formulaic. It's just literally we're gonna go to each god and get a trial that you see, like you see how it's happening, and you see what's happening here and what's going on. Like, that his guy throughout all of this is Zeus. Like, that is not a shock when you find out. Oh, because everybody's like, "Where's Zeus at? Who's Zeus? That's the biggest power, because that's the power of Zeus. Obviously, the lightning, right?" And you're just like, "Where's Zeus at?" And then the guy who's been guiding Freddy throughout this entire thing comes out. It's like, "I'm Zeus." You're like, "Of course you are. We knew you were. Why are you?"
Who else would be Zeus? What a weird statement. Duh. Of course you're Zeus.
Well, yeah, and so yeah, like I did not. I do not think people would be wrong if they didn't like it. To me, it's just for me. I think the reason why I liked it goes back to one of the things of it's just they finally were moving. It finally felt like a continuation, because one of the times, like I think the first person he goes up to, he gets his power from is Wisdom, and him having to admit, Freddy having to admit that he's partly upset at Billy and Captain Marvel, because that fight with Captain Nazi is why his grandfather died and why he's in this predicament in the first place. He lost out being a star football player and being able to walk and do all these things. He became crippled, and he lost a family member because Captain Marvel wasn't more careful with who he was fighting and where he was fighting. And so that connecting back to that Power Shazam thing, I think I instinctively gave it more credit, because I'm like, oh, this is the first time they've really done this.
That's fair. That's fair. You know what? And there's stuff like that that really, you're right. It matters. I like it more because you're mentioning things like that. Mm-hmm. I think for me, mine's more of a macro problem than a micro.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so at the end, Freddy becomes the new Captain Marvel by invoking the name Shazam at the end, gets the power. Mary still doesn't have her power; she's laid up, and so I think in the final crisis, Black Adam gives her power, turning her evil, basically.
Yes.
And so we have a evil Mary Marvel.
Yes.
Going forward, because why the fuck not?
Well, you gotta okay. Trials happens. 12 issues, which is a long run. It's a maxi series.
That's a long series.
They update Captain Marvel, give him a white costume and long hair. He becomes just the Wizard Shazam under Marvel, and Freddie Freeman becomes Shazam. Okay. In 3 issues, Black Adam and Isis take over the Rocket Fraternity and recruit Mary Marvel, who's still evil, to fight against the JSA and Billy Batson. So why do you have the trials?
Yeah. But
it's also like the end of this iteration. You see, if you choose coming, they're kind of just telling stories. I get that stuff, but I didn't like it. How about that?
Also, got to say this thing. Going back to the Mary Marvel thing, I think that it. And I think this is also a good critique of Trials of Shazam. It probably should have gone to Mary to begin with, because during the Power of Shazam, they make a good point that the Wizard of Shazam keeps saying to Mary, he's like, "You understand these powers better than your brother does," but and sometimes going, but maybe you shouldn't because you're a woman. I still believe that men should have, like, it's such a sexist answer of. But I believe that, men still can do things that women can't, so you can't be like the main Captain Marvel. But like, you do understand this stuff way better than he does. Like she's the one that understands how he can share his powers to save Freddy's life and turn Freddy into Captain Marvel Jr. Right? So I think there is an argument to be made. Now, granted, he's Captain Marvel Jr., so there is that thing there. But having Mary laid up in the hospital without powers and then having her turn evil. Again, I don't really care because I don't really have the connection to the characters, but maybe people out there who did would see that as a slap in the face because, that's kind of a shitty way to take care of your family.
But at the same time, I kind of got how, I liked that they didn't have the Marvel characters up on a pedestal. Like, she was susceptible to being manipulated because she was so depressed. And I get that, and I appreciated that, and I think that worked. It's just, for me, it's just, man.
Yeah.
It felt like they were just kind of throwing around the Marvel family at the end of it all, and that's fine. You do what you got to do, but I didn't love it.
No, I mean, I think that's the other thing too. When you get down to the back half of Mary and Billy are in Blackest Night a little bit. It's a one shot. They bring back the Power of Shazam for that one issue where they're not even really in it. Like they're without powers, talking about Osiris who gets resurrected and stuff like that. So it's not even like it's not even their story, really, in that one. But you're right. I feel like.
But that's also like one of the definitions of almost Captain Marvel and Shazam at this point is he's not the star of his own story. He's a vehicle for you to tell other stories.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that with Nifty 2 in a second. But particularly with the emergence of Black Adam as such a major player in the universe near the end of Pre-52, it was like, he's here because of his connection to Captain Marvel, but we don't really need Captain Marvel anymore to facilitate his existence.
Well,
do you know what I'm saying?
Well, let's to kind of jump ahead real quick to other medium. Let's not forget, while his movie didn't come out first, they announced and cast for Black Adam first.
Facts.
I mean, it's just it's kind of disrespectful.
Yeah, disrespectful.
But it's what they've been doing with the character, and like you said, towards the end, right when you're leading up to Flashpoint. It's kind of like they ran out of steam. We're just like, oh yeah, we still got these characters. We should do something with them. So, all right. So Flashpoint, we'll break that up because technically it should be the other version, but it kind of leads into New 52. They changed the characters a little bit. You have Billy Batson, Mary Batson, and Freddie Freeman. They're joined by Eugene Cho, Pedro Pina, and Darla Dudley, and they form the Shazam family. And when all 6 kids say Shazam, they turn into Captain Thunder. Yeah, and so the 3 new kids, Eugene, Pedro, and Darla, they are when they relaunch New 52, they are part of the foster family that Billy is into. And I guess we got to get into that now. Where I actually
I have nothing to say about these kids, and I get it. I'll be the first to say I brought it up earlier because the power sharing is baked into the character. I get it. I'm not a stupid person. I understand. I just don't fucking like it. And I get that it appeals to more kids because you could be a Marvel kid and you could have these powers too. I understand it. I get why they're doing it. I'm not ignorant to these facts. I'm just telling you, Dpalm, personal preference, not a fan. And that's probably like old fan in me screaming out or some shit, but like it's probably not the most healthy way to look at it. But I'm just telling you where I come from on this one.
Well, I think it goes back down to it doesn't work because have I said how much I like Geoff Johns? Have I said it today?
You know what? I feel like we end up having to cover ourselves on the Geoff Johns thing a lot.
I need to say
we do like Geoff Johns.
I just need to say I like Geoff Johns. All right, I like Geoff Johns. I do not like anything of what he did with Shazam and New 52. Even down to the cloak and the hood. Why?
Okay, so I get why they did that because for so long the argument has, and rightly fucking been, this is just Superman 2. And so they wanted to have him skew more to the mystical side of the universe without stepping on Wonder Woman's toes. They were trying to create a place for him. Yeah. And as you and I could clearly see, it didn't fucking work.
No, it just... I'll say this.
They gave him 2 full issues of this reintroduced Justice League. 0 and 21. They then gave him the backups from 7 through, I believe, 15.
Yeah, like it's...
And it didn't work.
Well, the problem I have with this is it's like you wouldn't even introduce them correctly. You didn't even when you go and you find the New 52 Shazam and you get that trade paperback. All it is what we're saying here is issues 7 through 11 of Justice League, issue 0, 14 to 16, and 18 to 21. Right? They smash them all together, and these are the backups of those Justice League issues. Right? He doesn't even have his own fucking book. And
I believe at this point, Cyborg's in there. One of the few Justice League members who doesn't have his own book.
Yeah, and it feels like it's a condensed orange story. And I'll say this, like, I have no feelings whatsoever about the additional kids. The kids are in the movie, and they're done way better. I feel like the movie does a good job of combining some of the power of Shazam and some of the New 52 stuff, but it doesn't, and it's something I've never said about a DC film, they do the New 52 stuff better. They do the New 52 stuff better. We just did our Aquaman book where we were like, New 52 Aquaman, for all the problems with it, it's way better than what they did in the movie, right? The movie does the New 52 stuff better because it feels like a family. Like in the New 50 in the book, it's all smashed together because again, it's not a full story. It's a backup story. It's an also ran.
It's parts of the story,
right? And so it doesn't feel like it feels rushed, and it feels smashed together, and it feels like nobody actually cared. And honestly, I like Geoff Johns. It's not some of Geoff Johns' best work. By far. I know some people liked it. Because apparently it got acclaim. I will say the one thing I think he did do that I think was smart is officially renaming the hero to Shazam. I know some people don't like that, but you got to do it. You got to do it. At this point, you cannot keep doing books where they have the character and you can't put his name on the cover. You can't do that. if it's either
I hear
that or
everything you're
stop
saying.
doing it.
You're 100% right. Disagree 100%.
I know. And there's a lot of people out there. There are a lot of people out there that disagree with me. There's a lot of people out there that disagree with me too. But I'm just like, well, here's my thing.
You're right. You're right. I know you're right. Intellectually, I know you're right. How about that?
But
I just don't like it.
But I'll put it this way. Like, I think they got to make a decision. Either you're going to go 100% in, and you got to, like, I don't know. They got to decide what they're going to do with this character at this point. Like, I know he had a part in Metal. I know they had the new. You're reading the Rebirth book right now, right? I know you're not a big fan. I
started it.
Yeah,
I started it. I haven't committed to saying this is going to be a book I'm going to read much longer.
Well, that's not bad. It's not a total shoot down.
No, it's not.
But here's the thing. Overall, I actually like this character. I do. I think there's a lot of potential with this character.
Oh, it's a good character. I'm not. I don't.
No.
I think it's a good character.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you. I know you believe the same thing. You know, I think we both believe there's a good character with a lot of potential. I just think that WB and DC have a hard time because even we're about to get into other versions and other medium. I'll just talk real quickly. By the time you hear this, my review for the movie should be up and the embargo should be up. The movie is fucking good. The movie is probably the best film they've ever fucking done. You know, but what strikes me so much is everyone I say that to goes, but the trailers are trash. The trailers don't look interesting. I'm like, because they don't know how to market this character. And that goes back to after doing the reading for this book, for this character in the books, they don't know how to market the character in the books either. They do not know where this character fits into their world. And they do not know how to market it on a large base, which is weird to me because I'm like, you should just market it like Marvel markets Spider-Man. It's a young kid who gets the powers of a god.
It's a power which is film and movie.
It's
property.
That makes money.
It's Dial H for Hero.
That's how you
try that. Just fix this.
That's all you got to do. That's literally all you have to do. And so I don't understand why they struggle so much with this when it seems simple. But I don't know. It's like
there's clearly a bigger gap that you and I aren't seeing because it shouldn't be as hard as it looks.
It shouldn't be because again, I'm somebody who went into the movie not giving a shit about Shazam. Came out going, hey, I liked it. Then I did the reading. I did the reading after I watched the movie. Again, having never really read any of the Captain Marvel books or even given a shit, then going back and reading them, going like, you guys had something here. What the fuck were you? Why didn't this take off? Like, what's going on here? And it's just consistency.
So many false starts, so many lack of. Honestly, I tie it to lack of commitment.
Yeah, that's 100% what it is.
From corporate and from because you have people poised to make these things a run. DC would back off, or a crisis would happen, or a reshuffle, or something, and it just felt like. And then with the Bendis, like you and I both love Bendis, it just never hit like that. Mm-hmm. The New 52 never hit. Mm-hmm. I thought he did good stuff for the family in the JSA run.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of his use of this family in the JSA run. Huge fan.
Yeah. So, all right, want to get into other versions?
All right, here we go.
You never did are you doing your little 5 minutes?
Oh, let's get on my work credit in this one.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go through just the major of the versions. Flashpoint, we kind of talked about the 7 kids. Each one says the word Shazam together. They become Captain Thunder.
I'm sorry.
Dark Knight Strikes. Go ahead.
One thing I want to go back to the New 52 version is the New 52, they have the kids, there's a power sharing thing, and when they all say Shazam, they each get their own set of powers. They basically split up the powers of Shazam. So some of them have the power of Mercury, some of them have the power of Zeus. It's
reverse fucking Power Rangers, and it makes my head want to explode.
Yeah, it actually is reverse Power Rangers. I'm sorry, I had to bring that up. Go ahead.
What if we get weaker together? Let's do it.
That is one of the things that it's like we share the power. Now we're all weaker. I'm like, but when you're fighting the villain.
How about you all vote on who gets to be the hero today?
Right.
There's 6 of you. Each of you gets a fucking day. I'm so.
That would actually be dope though.
Don't see. Look,
That would be dope, though.
That's top of the head.
Yo, call
Free,
the
DC.
Yo, that would be fucking awesome, actually, you know?
Billy, help, motherfucker. It's Tuesday. I work on Wednesday.
Right, I'm sorry.
Call Darla.
Right. You gotta call Darla. Yeah, I'm off today.
I don't rock like that on Tuesday. I'm sorry. I don't want to fuck with her. What if she needs all the power right now? I call this shit down and I fuck her up. No, man. Can't do it.
Right. Hey, what actually does happen in their fight when they do that? Mary's like in the middle. They're in the middle of a fight, and all of a sudden, like, Billy calls on the power, and like she's like all of a sudden weaker, and she's like, "Yo, I was trying to fly, now I can't fly anymore." I'm like, "Yo, this does not end well at all, folks. It's not end well." Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
New 52. Obviously, if you've read that series, they eventually bring back 52 Earths. Earth 5 ends up being the Earth S. And they do some one shots there. Let's see. I'm saving the big ones for last. That's another big one, actually. All right, what's that one now? So during the Forever Evil DC Comics 52 crossover, Alexander Luthor from Earth 3 is brought over by the Injustice League, or the Crime Syndicate, excuse me. And traditionally in the stories, Alexander Luthor's always been the one good man on that planet. However, this time in 52, because everything's super dark, even the good man is evil. And the heroes think they're going to save him and have him help them, but actually take up his mouth, he says his magic word, which is Shazam backwards, and becomes very evil and steals people's powers. It initially gives his sire to the resurrection of Darkseid after he's killed. Very interesting. It's a pretty good little story that ended up a lot of that New 52 and tied up a lot of that Darkseid Trinity War type stuff they were doing there. Let's get to the most famous of the alternate universes. First is Kingdom Come. 1996. We should do a comic book club on this, by the way.
Yeah, I reread it. So yeah, we definitely should.
I love Kingdom Come. It's one of those, it's not perfect, but it's comfort food. Because when it came out in 96, I was 11. So I was at the cusp of like, let's see what superhero comics can be. And Mark Waid now did this series, drawn and painted beautifully by Alex Ross, is the possible future of the DC universe. And it depicts a heroic war between two generations of heroes with humanity opting to try to kill everyone. And one of the biggest aces in the hole of one of humanity's leaders, Lex Luthor, is Captain Marvel. And throughout the book, you see Captain Marvel as like a bodyguard or attaché for Luthor. And all the heroes around them are nervous because they're like, we could never move against Luthor. He's got Captain Marvel on his side. Later in the series, it's revealed that he had brainwashed Billy Batson years ago, and Billy Batson had grown up to look just like the superhero power. And Ollie actually says, "You mean we've been sitting here in mortal fear of Billy freaking Batson?" But eventually he does say his word. He says Shazam. And you get the Superman Captain Marvel fight that's referenced everywhere. It's referenced they did I believe an OG or an original movie. It's on DC streaming now called First Thunder, maybe? Mm-hmm. It's depicted in Justice League Unlimited, this episode called Clash, Superman versus Captain Marvel. It's used in Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, and that trade paperback. The idea of the Earth's mightiest mortal versus Earth's preeminent alien defender is always one that's appealing to people, in the fact that magic in her Superman makes it a much more fair fight. He turns to Captain Marvel, unleashes a force that can destroy the world. The authorities try to stop a nuke. Captain Marvel takes Superman's words of encouragement and says, "You're the one who bridges the gap, Billy. You're the one who stands between humans and superhumans. You're the best of both of us. You tell me what I should do. Should I let the nuke fall and kill all of us? Or should I turn it back and let us continue a fight that could destroy the world?" Captain Marvel doesn't even give an answer. He just flies off, intercepts the bomb, and summons his lightning to detonate it while it's still airborne. Kills a lot of people, but he saves as many as possible. When Superman goes to the UN to almost wreak his havoc, he's calmed and ties Marvel's cape on the flagpole as a symbol of the metahumans of the world standing as a nation at the UN. It's one of the more famous iterations of Captain Marvel.
Well, you know, the other thing too about it is the one that actually also understood a unique thing that I don't think the rest of the books really lean on, the fact that, you know, the whole Earth's mightiest mortal, like Billy is of both worlds. He's you know, the superpowered hero, but he's also just a human little boy, right? It's just like it's and something that it's why Superman asked Billy to make the decision. He's like, you're of both worlds. You're just a human boy, but you're also one of us. So it should be up to your decision to decide what we do. And it's a unique thing of looking at, you know, the where Billy sits. And it's like, yeah, man, you guys should lean on this fucking more.
And other people out there listening say, I've never really read Kingdom Come. What does it look like? If you've ever seen the image of Captain Marvel painted with his hands on his chest, hips, that's the scene where he comes and beats the shit out of Superman.
Yeah.
It's the lightning striking and keeps Superman from stopping the fight. Mm-hmm. He is the lightning. And it's I think Alex Ross did a really great job in kind of depicting the power and glory of Captain Marvel, particularly in that scene. It's my go-to depiction when I think of Captain Marvel. I think of Elseworld. I think of Kingdom Come, and I think it's one of the best uses of the character, and especially in a limited place. All right, Chris, start the timer.
All right, we got it.
If this takes more than 5 minutes, I'll be very upset. So, when Captain Marvel was originally published by Fawcett Comics, Fawcett was the U.S. distributor of Captain Marvel. The UK distributor was a man named Mick Anglo, who wanted to replace Captain Marvel because the lawsuit was an American one. So they said, we're going to take Captain Marvel and turn him into a character called Marvelman. And they used other Fawcett reprint titles and used logos and trademarks that looked like Fawcett's. And it gave the appearance that Fawcett's line would still continue. So like Marvelman was just Captain Marvel under a different audience. He was a young reporter. He encounters an astrophysicist instead of a wizard. He gets some powers based on atomic energy instead of magic. Instead of saying Shazam, he says the word Kimota, which is atomic backwards. Instead of Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel, he was joined by Young Marvel Man and Kid Marvel Man. Both of their magic words were, as noted, Marvel Man. Marvel Man lineup showed up. Marvel Man and Young Marvel Man each had 346 issues published weekly. The last 36 issues were reprints of old Marvel Man stories. And that could be where this story ends. But it's not. Because if you listen to our podcasts before, you'll know that I say certain creators are crazy, and they actually make me a little nervous and scared. Alan Moore is one of those creators. Neil Gaiman's another one. And they both wrote this motherfucker going forward. So hold on to your butts. It's about to get fucking weird. Do you know any of this, by the way?
No. I try to.
God damn. Hold on the fuck. All right. It's going to take more than 5 minutes because I'm going to have to pause to have you ask questions. 1982, a British black and white anthology comic was launched called Warrior. Des Skin had decided to revive Marvelman in one of the features. I'm going to read the quote now from Wikipedia. He explained, "It was always going to be Marvelman. I knew the character's history. I had a few annuals as a kid, and those cheap comics weren't particularly thrilled with them outside of the occasional stunning art, but I always had a soft spot for Mick Anglo. So given the difference between a brand new character who would sell no copies or a somewhat forgotten character who might sell a dozen more, I opted to follow the similar relaunch I've done for Captain Britain." Let's never do that, please. I don't want to Captain Britain. We can do Excalibur, maybe. Tease it first, but then as a bonus, surprise those who actually cared. If it failed, it was only 6 pages out of the 52 of the anthology, the beauty of the anthology approach. Alan Moore said he would give his eye teeth to write Marvelman, and then Skim let him write a pitch. All right, Marvelman, the first issue of Warrior, Michael Moran, which is a stupid name, is a married man who's got migraines and is plagued by dreams of flying and unable to remember a word that's on the tip of a tongue in his dreams. If you've been a fan of Alan Moore, you know that the deconstruction of the superhero is one of his big tropes. The sympathetic villain. The superhero is a terror source. He would start exploring these in Marvelman. So, I'm now going to read. I'll give you some more. You know what? Let's just do this real quick. I'll do this really quickly. So Alan Moore writes Marvelman for a while. In 85, he started reprinting the stories from Warrior, colored and resized, and renamed the character Miracleman to avoid problems with Marvel. Issues 1 through 6 had all the old Warrior content, and the new Miracleman stories would come out from Alan Moore and the artist now known as Chuck Austin. His name was Chuck Beckham at the time. And Alan Moore wrote the book until issue 16. The character then stopped. There was a drop-off there. And I'll explain everything that happens in the issues. You don't want to know, trust me, but I'll explain them. Then in 1990, Neil Gaiman picks up the character. He planned 3 volumes, 6 issues each, called the Golden Age, Silver Age, and the Dark Age. 2 issues of the Silver Age were printed, but then Eclipse went out of business. Now you've got to remember, this is a character. It's an adaptation of a Fawcett character that said, hey, we're going to do something different and take him overseas. Neil Gaiman had written the next couple of issues, but it was never published. A few pages of 25 eventually leaked to various websites, and the Dark Age was rumored to what would happen. This is where things get really weird. So, in 96, Todd McFarlane buys all of Eclipse's creative assets, including the reported Miracleman rights, for $25,000. In 2001, McFarlane said he owned all the rights for Miracleman and dismissed Neil Gaiman's claims of co-ownership. He then brought the character into some of his Spawn books. Michael Moran was there, and he used the character as a man named the Man of Miracles. Gaiman formed an LLC in 2001, Marvels and Miracles LLC, the company which the goal of which was to clear up the ownership of Miracleman long term. In 2002, he sued McFarlane for the unauthorized use of Miracleman. And in 2009, it emerged that Anglo had actually always had the rights of Marvelman from the beginning because he had purchased the rights directly from Quality Communications. Eclipse and McFarlane were all illegitimate claims. So, in 2009, that same year, Marvel Comics announces that they had bought the rights to Marvelman from Mick Anglo. In 2010, a Marvelman Classic Primer one-shot was published with Mick Anglo's interviews and a bunch of other things in history. At Comic-Con 2013, they announced that they had solicited the rights to Miracleman, that Neil Gaiman would finish the story started 25 years earlier. The reprinting started January 2014. September 2014, the first new Miracleman content under Marvel Comics banner was announced. It was a lost story by Grant Morrison that he had written in the 80s, and it was drawn by Joe Quesada. The reprints proceeded through number 16, when the series was titled Miracleman: The Golden Age, which reprinted the Golden Age from what I'm about to tell you guys about. The Silver Ages, issue 1 through 3, were announced through 2017. And mind you, only 1 through 2 ever actually were released. These issues never came out. At San Diego 2018, at a retailer-only event, Marvel said that there had been new legal hurdles, but they had just been resolved. And then in 2019, we would see the publication of Miracleman finally occur with Gaiman and Buckingham on board.
Jesus Christ.
The story that's being told by Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, and Neil fucking Gaiman is somehow crazier than the legal drama.
So here's the thing, though, because when you mentioned Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, I was like, there's got to be a Grant Morrison in there. That's a trinity of fucking. That's a trinity of psychopath when it comes to writers. And when I saw Grant Morrison, I was like, of course Grant Morrison jumped into this shit. This has his name written all over the fucking shit. Of course he did. I'm sorry.
Okay. So as I mentioned, that was really funny. When Alan Moore picks up the character, Michael Moran is working as a reporter, and he's got these dreams of flying and a word he can't think of and all these nightmares. And during his job one day, he gets caught up in a terrorist raid on a nuclear power plant. He sees the word atomic in a mirror and remembers it. He sees it backwards. He says the word Kitoma. Marvelman was reborn and saves the day. So if you're saying, this sounds a lot like Sentry, that's what Marvel was trying to do with Sentry. They didn't have the rights to Miracleman, so they did a Sentry story. Here's where things get worse, because you got to remember who's writing him. So if you think that, amnesiac superhero but gets his powers back, that should end nicely, you couldn't be more wrong. As Marvelman, Moran remembers everything. He remembers all of the equivalent of the Whiz Comics. He explains that to his wife that He lost his memories when all the Marvelman family, Kid Marvelman, young Marvelman, they were all caught in an atomic explosion. So Marvelman's reappearance, of course, is big news. But as I told you, Alan Moore liked to investigate themes of superheroes as terror. And Kid Marvelman, he survived the explosion too, but he also remembered everything and had his powers. He comes and attacks Marvelman because his powers had corrupted him. He never powered down. He became a sociopath.
Of course.
He ran a corporation. It was evil taking over the world. And so he fights Miracleman, Marvelman. I'm going to switch the two because it's honestly the same character. And Marvelman beats him. And by mistake, while he's beating the shit out of Marvelman, Kid Marvelman says the name Marvelman and reverts to 13-year-old Johnny Bates because he never aged. The boy, innocent, but aware of the evil that Kid Marvelman had created and participated in, falls into a catatonic state and passes out. He goes into a coma, basically, because he's in shock of everything he has done. Marvelman goes through and eventually he's superheroing again and ends up in a fight with a new superhero called Big Ben and finds his way into a secret military bunker where he sees an alien spacecraft and two non-human skeletons fused together. He views a file that reveals his entire experience as a superhero was a simulation as part of a military research project. He's trying to enhance the human body using alien tech. The other subjects himself were kept unconscious. Their minds filled with stories and villains put with comic books by the researchers for fear of what they could do if they awoke. They decided the project would be terminated, and where they sent Marvelman and his two young companions on a final real adventure where a nuclear device would annihilate them. That was the real backstory of those Whiz comics. So, what happened? Kid Marvelman kept his powers, became a sociopath. Moran survived and was erased, and young Miracleman at this point died. It's also revealed in this issue, Liz is pregnant with his child, first naturally born superhuman on Earth. So the British, what he finds out is that his nemesis, Dr. Sylvania's equivalent, Dr. Gargunza, I'm telling you, they didn't try very hard with these names. He'd actually been the scientist behind the creation of Marvelman. In the stories, he thought that, he was always just the bad guy. But the truth was, he was a geneticist for the Nazis who had been recruited by the British after World War II. So the British looked at the U.S. and the Soviets and said, we can't keep up with these nukes. So what do? We need to have this alien superpower reverse engineered to create our own nuke.
Naturally.
So the Marvelman project consisted of giving someone a second body, which was stored in extra-dimensional space when not in use. When the word was spoken, the bodies would switch place, the mind was transferred as well.
That's...
At the end of this issue, it's revealed that Gargunza's actual purpose is because of he had a crisis of conscience after his mother died. He became afraid of death, so he determined that he was going to use Marvelman's son to house his own consciousness or child. Miracleman 9, his daughter is born. It's a highly controversial comic because it's a highly graphic birth scene. And two aliens races come to the Earth to try to basically take this child. During this encounter, Johnny Bates comes out of his coma. He's in a group home. And he's bullied. And there's a scene. It's one that's always stuck with me. I read this when I was probably 15 or 16. Someone had the Miracleman comics in my high school. The kids are beating him in a bathroom, and the boys are going to rape him in a bathroom. And you see, there's a close-up on Johnny Bates' face when he says, please don't, please don't, please don't. And then he whispers, Miracleman. And he unleashes that sociopathic superhero again. He kills everyone in London. and 40,000 people were killed.
Who's writing? Who's writing it? Is this still Alan Moore? Is this still Alan Moore?
This is Gaiman.
This is Gaiman.
This is Gaiman. Oh no, this is more. This is still more.
Good God.
And after help from these alien races, Miracleman ends up killing Johnny Bates. And the world knows about superheroes. So the end of Moore's run has Miracleman and his companions take over the planet. And that's where Moore's run ends. So Gaiman's plan was the Golden Age, Silver Age, Dark Age. The Golden Age was going to be the world some years later. It worked for a while. It was 3 issues, 6 issues each, excuse me. Golden Age showed the world as a utopia. Alien technologies and Miracleman and his other metahumans have made the world perfect. But Miracleman himself has nagging doubts because he remembers what happened, how it got there. He remembers killing Kid Miracleman. Silver Age, only 2 issues ever dropped. Hopefully it'll be coming out very soon. The Dark Age has been revealed to be the return of Kid Miracleman. That's hopefully what's coming. But that, my friend, is the most infamous and most convoluted and most possibly legally wrought version of Captain Marvel. Fair. It's a fair reaction.
I got nothing on what you just said there. But at the same time,
It's nothing to get.
I kind of want to read it.
You kind of want to read it.
I kind of like, I'm like, I'm going, what the fuck is he talking about? This is fucking crazy. But then I'm like, but I kind of want to read it.
I must read it.
I must read it because it's also Alan Moore, who's a fucking crazy person. And
It's easier to get a hold of now than it's ever been because of the Marvel deal. There's a lot of reprints out there. I'll see if we can find a good one to put in the links. But yeah, the Miracleman stuff is amazing. It's a lot. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It is a lot, but it's worth it, man. It's some very, 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 very well done Marvel. And yeah, it's just a lot.
Holy shit. Well, there you guys have it. Was there anything else we got to throw in there? I'm not sure. Was there anything else we got to throw in there for Shazam / Captain Marvel or anything like that?
No, I think I've covered everything I had to cover. Everything I told myself I was going to do, everything I was going to say about Miracleman, I think I said.
Yeah, no, you got to throw it in there. And just, I think we're all scared now. So, yeah.
You should. If you've never heard of that, that's fine. That's for the 4 nerds who are yelling at us like, you're going to skip over Miracleman. We didn't. We didn't.
So a couple things here. One, make sure you go check out the YouTube page. I'll have my by the time you're listening to this, should have the review for Shazam up. You can see what my thoughts are on the movie. Also, if we still have plenty of tickets left for the DC show and the LA show of Avengers Endgame. I know we're selling our tickets even before the main tickets go on sale. So, come out and join us here in DC, or go and join Ro and Shanna out in LA. Go to endgame.mtrnetwork.net to get your tickets. Excuse me. Look forward to see. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna have a lot of fun. One, it's gonna be a great movie, and two, it's gonna be great to see the movie with all you guys out there anyway. So, make sure you guys do that. Also, in the links to the show will be a link to our new MTR Network Thanos Snap shirt. So our logo is disintegrating. Yeah, it's kind of dope. So the link will be in the show notes for that. And don't forget, we'll be back. Hopefully, we'll do a quick turnaround on this one. Or we got a 2-parter coming up on Iron Man before the movie comes out. So I'm looking forward to getting over and dealing with that. So yeah, folks, thank you guys very much for listening. We made this one. I didn't think we were going to talk this long on this one, but we did. So I thank you guys very much for listening. And until next time, we are out of here. Peace.